What up, everybody? It's Chin, and we're in the forum today. This forum comes from Vegas Style, and he has aces in the small blind versus two calling stations. It's going to get pretty tricky after he makes a couple mistakes. So we're going to walk through it together, and I'll discuss my thoughts. All right, so here we go. We have aces in the small blind, and EP raises to 25, get called by the button, and now it's on us, and we have to decide what to do. So at this point, we have to decide whether we want to call, raise. Obviously, we're never folding. So Vegas Style decides to raise, which I think it's the correct play, obviously. But I think he chooses an incorrect sizing. And I think that this should be closer to 125, 150 rather than it being 65. So I like the fact that he's 3-betting, but I don't like the fact that he's choosing this very small size. He decided to choose this size because he knows that he's going to be at an inflated pot out of position against calling stations. Now, whether that's true or not is debatable, but if it is true, that's even better, and we should just charge our opponents the maximum to go into the pot. So if you know you're going to be out of position, if you know that you're going to go inflated into a pot with stations, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. We just have to charge our opponents the maximum to see the flop. And if they're willing to pay 150 to go up against our aces, then we should just charge them 150 rather than charge them 65. So that's my little rant about that. So it goes call, which is expected given the small sizes. And now we see a flop of 9-8-3 rainbow. So given this flop, I think we should be betting strictly for value. And we're only really afraid of 3 combos of sets. And I mean, 3 combos of each set. And then the 9-8 suited. And that's about it. Everything else we pretty much crush. And given the fact that they're calling so liberally, I think that this is a bet strictly for value. Vegas Style decides to bet 150, and I think that's really good. We're betting 3/4 pot. And unexpectedly or expectedly, it goes call. And the turn comes the 4 of clubs, which is an extremely clean card for our hand. And there is 650 in the middle, and we have to decide if we want to check or bet. So at this point, I think we should just clearly just bet again, strictly for value and for some protection. The 4 of clubs really does not change the board in any way. I would be more concerned if it was like a 7, a 10, a jack, a 9, or a queen. But the 4 of clubs really changes absolutely nothing, and we should bet strictly for value and be pretty happy to get stacks in here. So Vegas Style decides to check, which is a pretty interesting line, and I don't really agree with it for the reasons I stated. And unfortunately, it checks through, which is probably the worst case scenario for our hand. The river comes to 3 of hearts, which again is a very favorable run out, and we have a decision between checking or betting again. Again, I think we should just strictly be betting for value. I expect these guys to call very liberally like they're showing to do. So Vegas Style decides to check once more, which I think is a mistake again. And Villain 4 decides to bet 200, and Villain 9 decides to call. At this point, we have a decision between folding, calling, or raising. And I am in favor of just jamming this strictly for value. I expect to be ahead of both of our opponent's ranges, and we're really only losing to 3x combinations, which I don't see them having often enough. So I don't expect our opponent to show up here with 10s. I don't expect them to show up here with houses, given that the turn checked through. So I think this is going to be a jam strictly for value, and given that we underrepresented our hand on turn and river, I expect this to be a pretty good jam strictly for value. Vegas Style decides to call, and unfortunately for us, we're going to end up losing this hand to a 3x combination. But I think that the main thing you want to get away from this hand is that when we're going to the flop, even out of position, you don't necessarily want to be scared. You want to just charge your opponent's maximum. Even if you know they're going to call, that's fine. Just charge them more to go into the flop. When you get a favorable flop, just keep betting and just value bet them to death, because they're very willing to call you. And this is where we make our money. So without that, we can't necessarily make money. So with that being said, I'll wrap it up here. Peace.